Thanking you.
Thanking you for watching.
Thanking you is what I'm doing.
If you are liking, subscribing, belowing. Hi, I'm Emmy.
And I'm James.
And welcome back to The Bestiary, Monster Manual A to Z. And James, what are we discussing today?
Well, not the members of a genre-spanning pop-funk band. It's elementals, earth, wind, fire, and water.
For good measure, all four. Yes, we are going through the section of the book where we cover the four basic elementals. These are not to say that these are all the elementals. Elementals is a very large, overreaching category, but these four right here are the basic spirits that make up the forces within the elemental planes.
Yeah, and they are really sort of semi-sentient chunks of those elemental planes themselves. Elementals have no society. They are not particularly intelligent. They are simply somewhat thinking embodiments of the element that they are comprised of. And they really are pretty much as simple as that.
Yeah, they have no motives. They have no particular need to do anything unless they are summoned to do something. So if you're on the elemental plane, you might encounter one of these existing, but they don't typically have territorialness or anything like that. I can't imagine you really fighting one. Their whole purpose is to simply exist as part of the plane. But if they've been summoned here, which is the primary method which they arrive upon this plane, they don't typically fall through like some other elementals. These guys typically have to be summoned here. So that's primarily how you're going to find them. You might have one of their party members who's brought them here. You might encounter one guarding something. Or you might be fighting a summoner who's brought one onto the field.
Yeah, they generally, because they have been brought to material plane, are bound to some kind of humanoid form. An earth elemental would basically imagine fighting a small hill with a face, for example. But they are not themselves humanoid. They are simply bound to a form that makes sense to exist in a different aspect of reality. So the fire elemental has a kind of structure to it, despite being made of something not strictly physical. Same goes for air, water, and obviously this is depicted in the different examples of art. The air elemental, I think, making possibly one of my favorite facial expressions, that sound of just like whoa coming from it. The earth elemental looking extremely grumpy, with a face I think just makes the noise of brr.
I'm an earth elemental, and I don't care. And then the fire elemental, we keep going back to the mouths, I think. I don't know why. They're so expressive, the mouths, but those like drips of fire coming down, it's very intimidating.
I mean, out of all of them, I think the fire elemental is probably the most outwardly threatening looking, because fire.
The face in the water one is just, it looks flat.
Yeah.
Kind of hits an uncanny valley, like freakiness a little bit to me, at the very least.
Yeah, like the water one actually, out of all of them, is actually slightly creepy looking.
Kind of got that ghost face, scream, killer thing.
I think that's what it's reminding me of. All of them large, all of them challenge rating 5, all of them with over 100 hit points, so these things are no joke. Bearing in mind that 100 plus hit points also comes with a bunch of damage resistances and immunities, so it's hard to do damage to them in the first place. A couple of them actually have some pretty impressive abilities. They all have their, basic, like slam attacks, pretty just generic hit you do damage. But the water and air elementals both have recharge abilities.
Yes.
In the case of the water, it's to whelm, which I think is possibly the only instance of that word being on its own and not prefixed by over or under that I've ever seen.
It cracks me up so much. I have summoned this mighty water elemental. Look at my magical prowess. And it is actually a pretty impressive thing to summon one of these things. It's a higher level thing. I have summoned this mighty water elemental to defend me in my quest, and it will whelm you.
Whelm.
It's the whelm is pretty intimidating despite its hilarious name. It recharges on a 5 or a 6, and it kind of does exactly what it sounds like. It grapples you and it grabs you, and it can grapple, I think, up to a large, or I believe it's up to 2 medium or small, I think. Either way.
And bearing in mind that you are being grappled by sentient water, it's then going to try and drown you in itself, which is, kind of.
Yeah, it really lends itself to the horror there. And then the air elemental has a whirlwind ability. So if, once again, like a lot of whirlwinds in this area, it makes everything kind of awful and hard. It runs through, does bludgeoning damage to you. It's a thing.
Only one of them has any vulnerabilities, being the earth elemental, which is vulnerable to thunder damage.
Very silly.
QACDC. So yeah, you can try and shatter it.
That one also has a really nasty armor class. It's 17. So
that whereas the others
chunky.
are all 13 for fire, 14 for water, and 15 for air.
Yeah. Pretty easy to hit otherwise. They've all got intelligences of 5 or 6. They all do speak primordial. They do also
dialects
of it. Yes, so it does specify which one in here. It does help. I know primordial is one of those languages that, like, if you know primordial, you kind of know these dialects. But I'm really seeing the flavor of this and how entertaining that could be in interacting with one of these things. Speaking primordial, you could have a lot of fun with that, I think, on both sides, both player and dungeon master. And primarily, I do think they speak these languages, not only just because primordial language is the language of the plains. It's old and it flows through them, but also so they can take commands.
Yeah. I mean, being just elements personified, well, not even really personified, really, just given form. They don't really have much use for language otherwise. What do you think Aquan sounds like? Like, is it just it's just the sound of somebody pouring a glass of water? you just throw some water on the ground and you've just insulted its mother.
And though speaking about what you were just saying about they've been formed into shapes, this is also an interesting lore thing that I was checking out in the front, which is that not all, but a lot of other elemental creatures like these have been given form and function. So I'm thinking again with the flavor of how you summon these, that there's that idea of, I am summoning this bit of this plane and I'm going to form it into the function that I need it. I'm going to take more or less energy depending on how much I need. There's a lot of fun you could have with this kind of magic, and it's part of what I think is fun about playing spellcasters is that you do get a lot of that almost science of how magic works. It's really fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of room for creativity. I mean, obviously you can just keep it simple and go like, I cast X, but I think it's a lot more enjoyable to like really get descriptive and creative in terms of how the magic you're using actually manifests. Again, it goes into how a golem, don't know, I mean, there are different pronunciations of that, but is technically an elemental spirit. It's just bound in that physical form, and so you can see how like there's this kind of interplay of different aspects of how the magic is actually manifesting.
And that's part of, again, going back to what I love about playing spellcasters is you get to really dive into that, especially if you're playing somebody who has studied this, whether you're playing any color of different spellcaster, you probably know a little bit about what you do, but especially if you're playing a wizard where you've really studied it, you've got that high intelligence, you know what you're doing, you know how these things work. It's just fun to play how that stat actually works. in the game. It's just neat.
Thank you for joining us once again here for the Bestiary Monster Manual A to Z. Do you remember the 21st night of September? Let us know down in the comments, and while you're there, you can give us a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and you can find links to our various social medias as well as our Patreon if you feel like supporting the Adventurers Pack a little more substantially. Hit the bell as well to be notified when we release new content, some of which you can find here. And join us next week where we will be addressing the Drow.